Hello, everybody. I am Cafer Deniz. I do PhD in Newcastle University Business School in the UK. My research topic is on effect of political connections on firm performance and firm value, and I conduct research on US presidential elections for 2016 and 2022. And let's start my wait a minute. So yeah, it will be fine. Yes. So we will talk about introduction and my research question and motivation and theoretical framework, literature, hypothesis, variables, data methodology, and some findings, and finally contributions. So let's start with the introductions. So what about the political connections phenomena, which is highly popular in last few years as a part of political finance discussions? For instance, FATSIA 2006 states that connecting to the head of the state is the strongest and most direct connections compared to other connections, because the head has the power to find some solutions for firms' issues, for firms' problems, because the head of the country is the only person who is in charge to can solve any problem. Of course, it should be in legal forms. And also, other literature says about 50 years ago, hardly any topic in the market folklore takes more attention than the presidential elections and the stock exchange connections. And Trump is one of the ideal case for this, because he was a real estate mogul, and also he was a very big businessman in the USA, and he became a politician. And interestingly, in 2000, like it was over 20 years ago, he said that I could be the first presidential candidate to run and make money on it. Then we will see whether he or his connections made money or not. And also other literature says, as these presidential elections were studied over 50 years in this literature, the financial effects of elections should not be ignored. So we do not ignore. Then my research question is whether this research attempt to find connected to the President Donald Trump political connections through different types of connections have positive financial economic advantage and firm value, like firm performance, and firm performance like public procurement contracts during Trump's presidential area from 2016 to 2022, and also connecting to the head of the state. Yes, sorry about that. So my motivation was about Trump because he had a golden experience in different sectors, like from real estate to golf clubs, and he entered to politics after 50 years experience in the business. And from 2017 to 2022, his family company, which is called Trump Organization, had more than 100 deals, and each of them is on average $1 million. And also he also had some liabilities, some loan from some big banks over $50 billion. These are all conflicts of interest because there are some watchdog institutions in the USA. They report that there are over 3,000 conflicts of interest for Trump. And the literature also states that there has been no enough fundings for the market and financial impacts of entrepreneurs who concurrently had positions in both business and politics. So that's why Donald Trump is an ideal laboratory for this, because he was at the same time, he was a businessman. He says he has no interest in the business after he enters to politics. However, his Trump organization still continues with his family ties, including his son-in-law called Jared Kushner and his sons. So that's why the president is an ideal laboratory for political connection analysis in terms of business outcomes. So we do have some theoretical framework, such as like research dependence theory. So it says companies are not always reachable, and the firms depend on official bodies because they depend on the resources, and the resources allocated by the usually some part of government bodies. Let's remember the three important questions and fundamental questions in economics. What to produce, who to produce, for whom to produce, and how to allocate the resources. So that's why it is important to access to allocated resources for companies. And also, these companies are dependent on the resources, both on business environment and government resources, not only just for business, but also government resources to survive and to develop their firm performance according to this theory. And also there's another theory says that which is called private interest theory of government, assuming that top administrators like the president is self-stimulated. And let's talk about the political capture theory. Stigler said about 50 years ago, the connected companies to the head of the state would receive more market and financial benefits. Therefore, more market and financial outcomes from the government, and have more informational benefit during their connections. That's why they want to have good, strong link with the government bodies. And finally, social network theory claims that the links between the executives of the firms and political candidates are strong, specifically among social networks. Hence, these links would hedge in the business world, because when the companies have strong connections to the head of the state, then the financial markets perceive that these companies are protected and could have some privilege by the government. And one of the recent literature says about connection types, like financial efforts to approach to politicians, such as White House visits and these visitors to identify physical interactions between corporate executives and influential politicians. This study was about Obama. They did not have to visit Obama himself, but the data shows, according to this study, they only visit White House. It could be the president or any White House administrators. And also, another recent literature says that professional networks such as previous business and government position experiences, they have better access to political system because they had former connections, so they could use for their business and better understand of how to affect political outcomes. So they have some experience in political system. And another one, board memberships. So these connections are also effect-laden ties and very intensive. These connections also could give some signals to markets as an insurance. This is a very important point because signals to markets through stock ownerships, for example, Acemoğlu and Tahun studied about 10 years ago. This is a unique measurement and non-contractable quid pro quo relations with companies and insurance for firms for helping and harming any actions like federal investigations or some tax issues, and sending positive signals to investors about the company's performance, so it could reduce firm uncertainty, which is very important in financial sectors. And also these insurance, this could be an insurance for politicians to prolong their incumbency period. So they could have some support from the financial, from firms and through some lobbyist actions. And there was another contributions called Political Action Committee contributions, which is unique to the USA. Individual sponsor for presidential elections, and another one, family ties. Family ties, like politicians might find family firms to better rent-seeking partners, given that the relation will last longer and because of the prospect of repeat deals. So Trump has a very good family ties as well. And my hypothesis, I have two hypotheses. One of them is companies which are linked to the president through business connections, let's say, are positively affected in terms of market reactions, which is called cumulative abnormal returns as firm performance. And finally, companies which are connected to the president through business connections are positively affected in terms of financial outcomes like firm value and public procurement contracts. So I will mention about the contributions, what I did. But briefly, until now, the literature did not classify any connections types. They just use the connections types as a whole. But what I did, I found a novel data for commercial tenants. Because Trump is a real estate mogul. So his income comes about, I think, 2/3 of the income comes from the real estate, and he has some commercial tenants and 15 of them are listed in S&P 500 index in the USA, which I study. And this is very unique connection type for this research. And also I use lobbyist as a connection types as well. There are about 10 companies, listed companies in S&P 500. And the other one is also another unique connection type for my research. Financial assets in financial disclosures, like such as stock ownership, like various account holdings, like brokerage account. And through these connections, there are over 90 listed companies, which I found. And there are also 10 contractors. And there is also another website which collects some kind of connection data for Donald Trump. They do have 34 listed companies in this index again. And also, in total, I would say 380 companies are non-connected to the firms, non-connected to the Donald Trump. And the previous paper also studied this presidential election. They had found 64 connected companies and also 432 non-connected companies in this index. But this connection data website is down now, which is called muketi.com. I contacted the author to access to this database. They sent the web archive website. I checked the website, but they have no this kind of the classifications. These are my variables, like cumulative abnormal, and definitions like cumulative abnormal refers to firm performance, like public procurement contracts, which are my dependent variables. And independent variables like liabilities. In detail, I do have stock ownership account holdings and commercial tenants. And I do use some like book to market ratio and assets and leverage for control variables as well. These also show the sources for the databases and the studies which they somehow studied. And what about data and methodology? So first of all, I use event study methodology, which needs specifically a shock in the financial markets or in any event. In the US, there are some political polls, and the media always say Trump cannot win. And surveys also told Clinton would win with 80% possibility against Trump, because 80% possibility was too much. But on the election date was 8th of November, and the election results were released the day after, on 9th November 2016. And interestingly, Trump won the election, although with just 20% possibility win. So it made this study unique and suitable for the event study methodology. And also I use some commercial tenants. The database comes from a Forbes report. Then the editor also published a book which is called White House Incorporation, like how Donald Trump turned the presidency into a business. And I read every single verse, and I quote some commercial tenants, and I check every commercial tenants with their evidence. Then I listed the only S&P 500 listed commercial tenants. And also I checked the financial disclosures, which was supposed to release it by Trump and his family members. And this was unique for my research as well. I also checked board membership data by WRDS, by BoardX, board executives database, to find the connections. For control variables, I use Compustat and CRSP. And for methodology, I used S&P 500 firms, connected versus non-connected firms. And I use quarterly data from 2016 to 2022 with an event study methodology. The main event is -22 +20 windows, and the trading day estimation is 255, and I only accept the companies if there are minimum 40 observations. I will also use for the second hypothesis for defensive technique. Yes, let me show the findings now. So these are the CARs, which is for cumulative abnormal return. So if you look at the graph which shows the non-connected firms' cumulative abnormal returns as a financial performance of S&P 500 index. So after eliminating some omics variables, some missing data, I had 362 non-connected firms. As you see, there is and 0 shows the event date, which is important, and -20 shows the 20 days before the event date, and the +20 shows the 20 days after the event dates. So for these non-connected companies, there is, and we, like in event study, we should, in this respect, we should more focus on the first 3-4 days. If you look at the first 3 days, there is a decrease. There is a decrease. I think you can see there as well. So this is the event study, and this is the event 9th of November, because the election was 8th of November, but the election results were released 9th of November 2016, and there were some fluctuations before the election for these non-connected companies. Then they started to decrease up to some point. Then there were some increase for a few for the rest of the period, but it was just under, it was, let's say, around 0.3%, which is very low for this compared to connected firms, which I'll show. Again, let me summarize, which is very important. For non-connected firms, we found firm performance, which is called cumulative abnormal returns now, I would say. We found only 0.3% on average increase, but in first 3 days, there was a decrease in cumulative abnormal returns. What about the commercial tenants? If you look at the commercial tenants, there were about 14 commercial tenants left. So although the US citizens did not expect to win for Donald Trump, but it seems commercial tenants were priced by the market by increasing to the event date, which is 9th of November, the election outcomes released, and there were almost 10% jump in 3 days, and on average it is more than 10%, and there is a continuous increase. I'm not sure you can see on the board or not. So let's say this is the 10%, and the graph shows like that. There is a continuous increase. So, which supports my hypothesis, commercial tenants had more cumulative abnormal returns overall. And also, what about the lobbyists? So we had about 13 lobbyists after the missing variables. So again, there were almost 10% jump in 3 days, and there was also a continuous increase in total for the benefit of lobbyists in S&P 500 index in 2016 presidential election. And if you look at the BuzzFeed, let's say, connections, there were about 30 companies, 30 listed companies, and there were about, let's say, 5% jump in the first 3 days, and on average, I would say it is almost 5%. If you compare to non-connected companies, if I come back to remember, it was just 0.3%, so almost zero. But here, the graphic does not only show a continuous increase, but also the level of the percentage, level of the increase. So, and financial disclosures also provides of 93 listed companies, but 82 of them had the relevant data for this period. And again, for first 2 days, there were about 2% jump, a sharp jump. Then there were some small fluctuations, but still almost 1.1 or 1.5% increase overall after the election for 20 days. Yeah, so why? Because the markets did not expect Donald Trump would win the election. There was a shock. Then we studied this shock by event study methodology. So the market reacted very quick, and after 3-4 days, the market started to stabilize, because the market start to take the information in general. So what about my contributions? So I would say first, a new categorization of connections, such as like lobbyists and commercial tenants. And second, I differentiated the connection times in terms of financial links, like brokerage, account liabilities in details. And third, commercial tenants connections, which is the one of the most strongest and novel contributions, because there's a connection which could be more beneficial for both sides, because let's say some listed companies are tenants, like commercial tenants of Donald Trump, and they pay about $50 million in a year, or sometimes $100 million in a year. Then they give signal to the markets they have a direct connections to Trump organization, so they might get benefits like public procurement contracts, etc. That's why the markets reacts via cumulative abnormal returns. And finally, I compare the periods after he lost in November 2022 election with the previous election he won. So I keep my data updated as much as the databases allow. So this was the main contribution of the research as well. Thank you so much who were with me today. Yes, question times.
Cafer Hocam, can you hear me?
Yes.
Thank you very much for this fantastic talk on a very significant topic, actually. So I once again thank you for accepting our invitation. So it was nice to listen to you, and thank you again as you let us be with you. Thank you. So I have a couple of questions, actually. When you talk about this issue, I was thinking, I had a question in my mind, and that the question was the following: what happens if your landlord becomes your president? So you gave the answer. If your landlord becomes the president, so you will be richer. So that's a very good point.
If you don't mind,
your rent would go up.
Go on. I'll complete.
Actually, maybe, I was thinking, whether or not these tenants, commercial tenants, are also his sponsors. I do not know. Maybe you can differentiate it if they, because these, you said, but they also sponsor for the presidential elections in the US case. If, for example, these commercial tenants are also sponsored, maybe you may need to differentiate it. I do not know. You have the data. So that was my first point. The second point is a kind of a counterfactual analysis. Maybe you can do it. For example, I just, think what happened. I mean, if Trump was not the president of the US, if he would continue as before, maybe you can then look at his competitors in the industry before he's been in office as president. Maybe, so it's going to be a counterfactual analysis in the sense that you can just look at his, let's say, competitors in the real estate industry, for example, and how they evolve, how they, developed over time, whether now they are richer or worse, I do not know. Just to, maybe that could be done. Another point, maybe, I mean, when we talk about the connections, I mean, maybe there could be kind of old connections and new connections, because, you know, that a differentiation between old and new connections might be interesting, right? Because, I mean, even you may have some new connections, not just because of the your former jobs, your former business, but because now you're a president, maybe there will be some new people approaching you, and you may have a new opportunity to, you know, expand not only your, but also their business as well. Maybe you may think of separating old and new connections as well. It's a very interesting, I mean, talk. Very, I mean, nice to listen to you. I do not know whether you have this, idiom in American English or UK English. Bal tutan parmağın yalan. I do not know whether you have it in the UK, but
they don't have honey in UK, you know.
Yeah, I mean, licking your finger. I don't know, maybe holding honey licks his or her. I don't know whether you have, I mean, such a idiom as well in American or UK English. But thank you again very much for this fantastic talk, Cafer. Thank you.
Thank you again for your contributions by your questions. For instance, old and weak, old and new connection types, I'll have a look at. Thank you so much for this. It's a very important point. Yes, it was my pleasure to be here online. The technology differs. Sometimes it is useful for academics. And also, I would say about the differentiating the commercial tenants. As I had only 15 companies, unfortunately, I cannot classify. I can classify, but I might not have meaningful results at the end. But I'll definitely look at the old and new connections type. Thank you so much.
You may also check whether these, you know, tenants had also been sponsors.
Yes, yes, definitely.
Cafer Hocam, do you still continue to collect data? Are you still collecting data?
Yes, I do have some. I'm collecting some financial data. Because I was expecting some data after the 2020 election as well to be released. So then I am in the process of completing the second hypothesis. Hopefully it will be in this summer. It will sort out.
And thank you very much. It's really a very interesting study, and it will be very joyful for us to hear the second half of the study when you finish it. So what happened after you lost? Thank you very much.
Thank you again. It was my pleasure to be invited for this talk series. Thank you so much. Any questions or contributions?
Ahmet Hocam, herhalde sizin var değil mi? Buyurun. Sonra ben.
Cafer Hocam, thank you for your presentation. I just wonder what extent it is it replicable in other political contexts in terms of its data you use and your methodology. For instance, can you translate this study or take it as a framework, the Turkish presidential contest in 2018 and 2023, or is it unique to the United States?
Yes.
In terms of connection types as well.
No, it's not unique to the US presidential election. And this is a very good point. When I was just organizing the room by help of my friends, I told them the recent presidential election in Turkey, in our home country, is very unique for this research as well. Why? Because according to some surveys, the vast majority of surveys, the current president, Recep Tayyip Erdogan, was not expected to win on 14th of May in the first round, but he was the first. Then the market already priced the second election for the benefit of him. Then, so the market the election outcomes almost released 15th of May, I would say. So 15th of May would be the event date. Then we can look at the like former 20 days or 10 days and the rest of the days as well. It would be a good topic as well. Yes, definitely. There are some other studies like Indonesia, even in Denmark, which has the lowest corruption rate, but they still have political connections issues. But interestingly, some other literature says these kind of political connections are also useful for some underdeveloped countries to turn around the problems, to solve the problems for the companies. Yeah, thank you so much for your question, Professor Ahmed.
You assume the legality and legitimacy of these political connections, or they may not be so? Are they legal and legitimate, these connections, or are they informal?
Yeah, sometimes, like in US case or in general, you ask?
In general.
Okay, there are two types of connections, let's say. I would say like one of them is legal ones, the other one is non-legal. I am not saying illegal, like non-legal ones.
Non-legal, yeah.
For instance, lobbyists. It is legal to do lobbying in the US. But for being a commercial tenant of the president or playing a golf in his golf club could be not legitimate. For instance, he has a very big golf club called Mar-a-Lago.
Mar-a-Lago.
Yeah, how do you call?
Mar-a-Lago.
Yeah, Mar-a-Lago, yeah. So its membership subscription fee was, $100,000 for a year. As soon as he became president, the membership price doubled to 200,000. Why? Because this Mar-a-Lago golf club offers might offer, let's say, some connections with Donald Trump in golf clubs, and which is very unique, and there is no media, so they might have some very quick chat or have some coffee. So that's why they wanted to connect to the president. They are happy to pay double price compared to last year. So there is no 100% inflation in the USA in 2016, but they doubled the price. Then I think it was a good answer for your question.
Thank you.
Yeah, a similar thing happened with his hotel in Washington, D.C. Normally, the diplomatic corps that visit the American presidents usually stay in other luxury hotels, but when he was president, especially the groups that came from the Arab world, like the Saudi Arabia, the MBS, and all his entourage, and the UAE, or literally actually anyone who wanted to impress him, who wanted to take some personal benefits out of his presidency, stayed in his Trump Tower hotel, Trump hotels in DC, and the amount that they paid was so appalling that even the media said this is actually bribery. And these governments are just trying to bribe him by just staying at his hotel. Like, imagine MBS coming with 200 people staying in his luxury hotel for a week, for 10 days. People said this is clearly a type of bribery, but it's legal. You know, there's a lot of things that go under the cover of legality. It's not legal.
Yes, it's a very good point. Why? Because as I said, there were about over 3,000 conflicts of interest.
It's just one of them.
Yes, it is just one of them, and also
Yeah.
they usually pay more than on average they paid in their previous visits. I read many articles on newspaper like New York Times, Wall Street, and there are many specific websites for these conflicts of interest as well. And more importantly, normally White House before was not holding events in Trump hotels, but as soon as he became president, the White House started to hold some events in Trump hotels or Trump real estates or some golf clubs, and it was highly criticized by the public as well. But he did not care up to some point. I think it gives also good. It gives also a good opportunity for academics to study on this topic as well. Yeah, it was a very good point. Thank you so much.
Actually, staying in his hotel is just a very little chunk of the kind of dirty stuff that he has done. You know, I think right around when he left presidency, Saudi Arabia, MBS himself invested some billions of dollars in Jared Kushner's business. Basically funded him with tons of money, probably in return for the support that he got. Probably the amount of dirty money that is being floating around is tens of billions of dollars in DC. And so staying in his hotel is just a very naive way of capturing the...
No, İsmail Hocam, it is just for a conversation. So where were you?
Just to start the conversation. Exactly. But the relationship between business and politicians, or more generally state, of course, is a huge topic in political science literature too. You know, and it's a concern for everyone, not just for critical people like Marxists, but also for liberals. There are a lot of disagreements among liberals as to how to handle the situation. Entire French republicanism, French kind of democracy is antithetical to these kinds of lobbyist groups who exert influence on politicians by basically buying them through money. Just very recently, there has been a lot of debates about election funding. In American politics, that they put limits to how much money you can put into presidential candidates. Before that, there weren't any limits. You could literally buy the candidates, and that's why strong firms put money to both candidates just to be on the safe side. Some money through that way to that candidate, some money to the other candidate through another channel. I think that's a huge issue, and I think what you're looking at is an interesting part, the connections part, which sparks a lot of questions, what about the types of connections, about the outcome of connections, but also looking from the reverse side, one also thinks about the fact that since he became president, he became under more scrutiny, probably as if he wasn't elected as Donald Trump, as president, then much of the corruption that is going on within his business wouldn't be discussed. For example, he's the only president that did not declare his tax returns. No one knows how much tax Donald Trump paid. It turned out that Washington Post at some point found out the secret documents, and it turned out that he paid something like $700 or something as tax. And this is a man who boasts about having $7 billion in bank account, and he paid only $700 or something. I, as a graduate student, paid more taxes to the American state than Donald Trump as as a billionaire. I think it's an interesting way that you're looking at the kinds of connections between business and politics, and I think it sparks a lot of interesting questions and conversations.
İsmail Hocam, simply because you were not his tenant. So that's the point.
That's one reason. You cannot afford to be his tenant, you know this.
Yeah, like very interesting points. You are definitely right. And for instance, like Mar-a-Lago also offers, as far as I remember, Air Force One trips for the members. So it is purely government resources, right? So business misunderstood the use of government resources, but they just want to get the benefit and the privilege. Yeah, hopefully, I will have some resources for the second test as well.
Cafer Hocam, once you are finished with this study, I mean, I'm sure your findings will appear, I mean, on the media. So I would suggest to quantify the total benefit. I mean, not only in a positive impact on firm performance these connections have, but maybe quantification. So how much money are we talking about in, as Ismail just said, tons of billions of dollars? I mean, if you come up with such a finding or just an estimation, it would be more sort of, I mean, your funding, your paper or study will be more, I mean, will have a incredible impact. So maybe you can also, work on trying to quantify the impact in terms of the, dollars, the bulks of dollars.
Yes, definitely. Thanks so much for the recommendation. This is for academic title, but for the media, I have some my own analysis which might not be useful for the academic purposes. But for instance, in his financial disclosures, he did not disclose the exact amount. He says he has some equities like shares, like stocks, from $50 million to $100 million. So minimum and maximum amount. He does not provide the full amount.
My point is, I mean, you mentioned the connected firms. I mean, there's an increase in the firm value. Just calculate how much value was created in total, right? So that value would be just because of the connections with the Trump administration. So in terms of, I mean, that's the firm value. I mean, how much of this out of this connection?
As far as I remember, I found $6 trillion compared to non-connected firms.
Extra,
yes,
okay.
Yes, as far as I remember, but I do not have my final result, but I did the same calculations as well. Yes, which is a very good point. Thank you.
And also, I think that it will be very interesting to analyze their current position after the loss of Trump. I mean, in the current period, if they are still earning, we're going to say that they are men for all seasons. But if they lost or if their financial power decreased, we're going to say that this is because of they supported Trump. So because you're continuing to collect data, as I said, it will be very interesting to hear the second half of the study, the current in the current period. What about the positions of these firms?
Yes,
Thank you very much, Cafer Hocam.
Take note as well, yes, because as the talk is, I think, streamed on YouTube. I did not take every single note, but I will take the link from Mr. Serdar, and I'll take all these important recommendations and feedbacks as well. Thank you so much.
One minor, very simple thing. Maybe probably you have looked at how it is, how it breaks down into different sectors. Which sectors have more connections to
Yes.
Trump than
Sector specific, yes.
because I assume, for example, the weapons producers, the lobbyists like NRA and others probably had way more connections, or the oil companies had more connections than other sectors. I assume it might be interesting to look.
Yes, I'll have a look at this as well. Thank you so much again, Ismail. Yes.
Okay.
If there is
Okay,
no,
we are done, I think.
thank you so much again for inviting me.
Thank
I was really excited to talk here in front of these respected academics. Hopefully, I would also present in person in Istanbul.
For sure. We expect to see you or have you in person in our campus. So, inshallah, in summer, if you visit Turkey once again this summer, we will be very happy to have you. I mean, to get to be our guest. I mean, inshallah, in summer we would like to have you in person in campus.
İnşallah.
Teşekkür ederiz Cafer Hocam.
Biz teşekkür ederim. Sağ olasın.
Teşekkür
Yani
ederim hocam.
affola. Biraz heyecanlıydım ama hamdolsun en azından teknik bir hata olmadan en azından ben ondan biraz şey yapıyordum.
Sağ olun.
Arkadaki şey gözüküyor mu bilmiyorum ama YouTube'dan bakacağım.